Okay, well let's get this lecture started. Today is no, it's not November 3rd anymore. It's November the 4th, so we have the election behind us. I haven't seen the results. They don't look good. It's going to be a close race. I'll just keep on with my teaching. Um, okay, today Texas history. We are going to talk about this lecture is a continuation of the other two lectures that we have here, and it is the Great Depression and the New Deal. The Great Depression lasted from 1920s until the early 40s, 39, 36, 37, 38. And what takes us out of the Depression is World War II. So unfortunately, the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor was I should say, a blessing in disguise. A horrible one, but it was a blessing in disguise. Now, virtually all Texans were affected by it. Every single Texan was. I doubt that there was anybody that wasn't affected. It forever changed the way people did things and the relationship between Texas and the federal government. That's some of the things that we have to keep in mind, that it did change things. Now, with that said, what causes the depression? The depression isn't caused by the stock market crash. It's caused by a series of economic catastrophes and uh, you know uh, building up stocks that really weren't worth that much. I mean, you name it. I mean, it wasn't one thing. Um, what it did is that the prices of soaring stocks actually hid the weakness in the economy. So after World War One, you're going to have a surplus of goods. You're going to have people that want to continue to be making the kind of money that they were making during the war. Um, Investors are going to pull their money out of the market because the market begins to flounder. Uh, banks are not going to be lending money. In addition to that, um, banks are going to be calling in a lot of loans so they can remain solvent because a lot of this money was spent unwisely on the stock market. Now, initially, Texans were not overly concerned because they say, hey, this is short lived. Nothing ever really affects Texas the way they say it does. Um, we're better than everybody else economically. But of course, when the depression happens, it reduces the demand for cotton and other agricultural goods. So it reduces the price of goods, and people are just sitting on enormous amounts of agricultural goods. Now, the other thing that we see is that we see unemployment in urban areas, and a lot of people from the urban areas come in, from the rural areas come to the urban areas in order to get a better jobs, and they're simply competing with individuals who already live in the urban areas. Okay, we're going to see in Texas a lot of volunteerism. We're also going to see, as I said, what we will see in Texas is we'll see a lot of volunteerism. We see a lot of soup kitchens and bread lines, and we're also going to see the number of crime escalate because of the shortage of money. Most of these people just wanted a job. Okay, now during the Great Depression, Dan Moody chooses not to seek re-election in 1930. 11 candidates run. Okay, Ross Sterling and Miriam Ferguson are the ones that it narrows down to. Ferguson had the most votes, but not the majority. Sterling wins in a runoff because remember they had to have 51% because there was so many people running. And Sterling serves one term. He did not do well because of the economic downturn. In addition to that, he clashes with the legislature and he refuses to direct government aid to the needy and unemployed. It's one of the things that we need to. It's always really hard to become a president during a time of economic downturn because what you'll have happen is it's really hard to get it out of the mess. And if you're not successful, then uh, will have those problems. Now, Sterling's reaction to the two events doom him, and I want you to read about the East Texas oil boom, and I want you to read about the Texas holiday plan. Okay, now in the East Texas oil boom, you begin to see people in East Texas begin to uh, have lucrative and big oil fields in Rusk County. uh, H.L. Hunt brought out the Dad Joyner, and he is the richest man in the United States by 1948. There is massive oil deposits in Texas on the East Coast. Okay, we have a lot of gas, natural gas, to the west, but there's a lot of oil in the eastern United States. Okay, so what you're going to have happen is you're going to have the overproduction of oil at this time. Uh, Governor Sterling even goes as far as declaring martial law, and with that, he sends 1,000 National Guardsmen to uh, to the area to make sure that these people listen. Now, he is heavily criticized. Many locals are concerned about state intervention. They occasionally fired on the National Guard. The Supreme Court, Texas Supreme Court, ends the martial law and gives the Railroad Commission the clear authority to limit oil and gas production. And this is how the Railroad Commission gets involved in uh, the oil and gas business. But hot oil that is sold on the black market, continues to flow. Um, and the resentment towards Governor Sterling helps lead to his defeat. I'm not going to say he was a horrible governor, but he just didn't know how to deal with the situation um, that was presented to him. Uh, Now, the Cotton Holiday Plan, what they did here is that they wanted to make it to where there was not an overproduction of cotton. So what they wanted to do is just, hey, don't produce some for a while. You know what I mean? And if you don't produce some for a while, then uh, uh, we will the price of cotton will come back up. But no, that's not what happens, and only about one third of the people of the cotton farmers actually participate in the plan. That we're going to get an incentive by the state. Okay, Governor Sterling did not support the plan, but the problem is that it's going to fall on his lap. And in addition to that, we're going to see something similar to that um, during the FDR administration here in a little bit, where we also have the reduction of planting of goods in the United States. Now, the return of the Fergusons, 1932. Remember, they were ousted. Ma Ferguson runs against Sterling in the Democratic Party. She leads after a primary election. She wins after a very close runoff, and the general election wins the general election in the fall. Texans who supported Democrats, FDR, were the ones that voted for Ma Ferguson. Now, the influence of Texas in the New Deal. Okay, like as soon as Ferguson and FDR are elected in 32. I'm sorry. Uh, he named as his vice president John Nance Garner. Okay, he was called Cactus. I think he was called Cactus Jack. I don't really remember. Yeah, Cactus Jack. And he was very valuable because he was the conduit between Texas and the White House. Okay, we have Texan Jesse Jones, who is going to be the head of the Reconstruction Finance Corporation, which is the primary funding agency to all New Deal programs. You're going to have to know some of these. He helped. He helped persuade FDR to create the FDIC. Remember, in Texas, we had bank insurance. Well, Jones is really big on getting FDR to agree to create the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation. Okay, Senators Morris Shepherd and Tom Connolly, I'm sorry, and 9 Texas chair House committee, important committees in the House of Representatives. Sam Rayburn, okay, is also very important. Marvin Jones in agriculture, and James P. Buchanan. Now, what this means, okay, we have 9 Texans. We have Senators Connolly and Morris Shepherd. And then we have John Nance Gardner, Cactus Jack, as the vice president. So Texas is going to receive a lot of money uh, during the Great Depression, and that's going to be a good thing. It's a bank panic. Governor Fergus orders that all the banks be closed on March 1933. There's a bank holiday to question the legality of the banks, and they also question the legality of closing the banks. But he does it, declares a bank holiday, FDR does, and it initializes the Emergency Banking Act and stabilizes the banking system. Okay? Now, early in 1933, we begin to see uh, the United States work towards helping Texas. The HOLOC, the Homeowners Loan Corporation, 44,000 Texans are given loans to remodel their homes. In addition to that, the Farm Credit Administration refinances farm mortgages. Texans receive about $250 million dollars to protect their farms from foreclosure at this time. It's very important. All this is federal money coming in. Now we're going to have FERA, the Federal Relief Administration, in 1933, and this was done really to create a lot of busy work. Okay, there is going to be some accusations of fraud. Basically, people were okay. Today we're going to paint all the fire hydrants yellow, and this was done under the Public Works PWA or WPA. I forget. I think it's the Works Public Administration. Work. They would tell somebody go out and paint all those trash cans silver, okay? And then they would come back and we were done. And they said, well, now paint them blue. They would shovel snow. They would do a lot of hand labor, okay? Now, FIRA eventually assists over 1 million Texans. We're also going to have the Civilian Conservation Corps. We'll talk about that in a minute. Uh, Under work relief, we're going to see work programs that are direct relief. Public Works Administration, the PWA. These were large. This corporation took charge of very large projects like post office, schools, uh, Will Rogers Coliseum, bridges. A lot of this stuff it will have a little concrete emblem that says this was erected during the FDR administration under the PWA. Now the Civil Works Administration was the one that I was talking about just now that I was getting confused. It lasted a very short time. About 250 Texans worked in it, and it was criticized for its waste because, like I said, they would one day they would say, "Well, we have a bunch of silver paint, so paint all those trash cans silver." And then the next day it said, "Well, we have a lot of blue paint, so now paint them all blue." Okay, so it was busy work. It was a waste of type project that terminated in 34. It was only around for like a year, but it still put money in the pockets of people so they could feed their families and have a sense of, hey, I'm working. Okay, now we talked about the PWA, we talked about the CWA, and now we're going to talk about the WPA. Now, the WPA was the white collar, okay? Now, it did also a lot of construction jobs, but in order to participate in those construction jobs, they had to be skilled. They had to be skilled labor. Like you had to be a plumber, you had to be a carpenter, it had to be something like that, okay? The other programs under the WPA are going to be like the Federal Theater Project, the WPA Music Project, the WPA Art Project, the Writers Project. This is where you're going to get photography from the Great Depression. You're going to have these huge murals that are going to be painted inside post offices. And if you go to the Will Rogers Coliseum, there is a big, painting of what Texas is embodied to be. Some of these are gone, and some of these have been torn down. They weren't taken care of. They're national treasures. Okay. Now, the WPA discriminated against women. All of these programs discriminated against women, and they were not, a lot of them did not give a lot of access to minorities like blacks and Hispanics. Blacks and Hispanics were allowed to join the Civilian Conservation Corps, but other than that, that was it. Uh, Now, two New Deal agencies were there for unemployed youth. My favorite New Deal agency is the Civilian Conservation Corps. 50,000 Texans over a 10-year period worked with this. They were between the ages of 18 and 25, and they worked in rural projects. Like, a lot of people would send these kids out to throw grass seed where they had taken all the grass off. They would send them to plant trees. I had to get after the dog chewing on herself. Uh, and they build a lot, help build a lot of the state parks here. Okay, a lot of these state parks that we have are Civilian Conservation Corps state parks. Okay, we also had the National Youth Organization, the NYA. Very important. This is going to later on going to be expanded under LBJ, and then it's going to be expanded again. Under JFK and then LBJ. Okay, this one worked with African Americans, whites, and minorities. Okay, this program got jobs for kids that were uh, uh, out of high school. They started debate programs, DECA, FFA. There was just a lot of hands-on programs, and this is going to create welding. It's going to create air conditioning and refrigeration. It's going to create all of these programs, but it's going to create a lot of good bureaucrats. When you have something as big as the New Deal, you have to have bureaucrats. You have to have white collar people that are running these programs, that are hiring and writing the paychecks and keeping records and doing the budget. So it's going to bring to Texas a lot of good things. Agricultural recovery, the AAA, the Agricultural Adjustment Act of May 1933, what it does is that it tells farmers reduce your production of cotton, wheat, rice, and other commodities, and we will give you a payment for not producing that. Well, what do? They still produce the cotton and they sell it on the black market, and the price of cotton and these goods never goes up. And the AAA determines that the best way to deal with this is to buy the crops from the farmers in Texas and then destroy the crops, like burn them, buy cows and kill them. You know, 27% of the Texas cotton crops during this period was destroyed in order to inflate the price of cotton and make it more profitable for Texas cotton farmers to produce cotton, to plant cotton. All right. Now the program works when they did it. Farmers receive about $43 million in government aid. They start getting better and top dollar for their cotton. And of course, World War II is around the corner. We're really going to make some money there. Okay, problems with the program. Not all of those, not those who did not participate did not benefit. You don't have a farm, you don't get it. Those who did not participate demanded mandatory production reduction. Okay, a lot of times they would say, we want to participate in it, but we want we want you to to reduce what we're to tell us to reduce what we are, but we want to get paid 100%. We don't want 80% of that, okay? And that's not going to work. But I mean, as we see it, cotton prices rise to about 12 cents a pound when they had been as low as 3 cents a pound. So they were doing good. Cattle producers are affected by the drought and the dust bowl. Okay? Oh, okay. And that's what hits them. They receive payments from the government. They employed about 30,000 Texans in the Federal Surplus Relief Corporation, and they slaughter healthy stock for canning. Mostly for canning. Uh, it's not very good, the canned beef, because it just doesn't last very long. And then they got that canned beef under the USDA and they gave it to the needy. So they would get a cow and they would cut it all up and they would put it in a can and then they would seal the can and then they would pressure cook the can. Canning meat is not bad. My wife cans meat, and if you do it right, it's actually pretty tasty because um, the meat stays in there with all the ingredients for a long time and it's cooked under pressure. So the flavor is all through the meat. It's really cool. And you can tell when something spoils because it's not that it doesn't smell good, it's that the seal is broken. It gets moldy pretty fast. You eat, yeah, you're going to die. Or you're going to wish you're dead. The effects of the Dust Bowl, of course, Texas and Oklahoma were the hardest hit. The Texas Panhandle, many farmers fled the region. They just left their stuff there. And Texas Congressman Marvin Jones promotes soil conservation. Believe it or not, you can go to Texas A&M and you can get a degree in soil conservation because we have to take care of our soil. You know, I had a neighbor a couple of years ago that had a little hill over there, a couple of houses down, and he took out all the weeds and all the grass, and then he tilled it up really nice, and it was looked really pretty, and he just left it like that. He would till it, and I said, "What are you gonna do?" And he said, "I don't know yet." And then we had one of those Texas turd floaters. You know what I mean? Like it rained like 4 inches in an hour or something outrageous like that, and all of his topsoil ended up where on the street because there wasn't any vegetation to hold it there. Now, one of the things that happens is that a lot of these programs are going to be declared unconstitutional by the Supreme Court, and that is the truth. And then, of course, what they'll do is that they declare them unconstitutional, but then they replace them with something else that is similar. Okay, what you do begin to see is that the replacement of these programs under other programs. Now everything is going well, but again, farmers produce record yields in Texas because they've got money, put more equipment into production, and drill more wells. And with this increase in cotton, the price of cotton goes from 12 cents to 8 cents a pound. So they haven't learned their lesson about, the overplanting of cotton. Now, the Agricultural Adjustment Act does get recalled and then they reissue it. And what it does is that it restricts the amount of land that you can put into production quotas. You get payments for conservation and price support payments. So this works really good. This really is going to help when World War II starts. And it's the basis of government farm policy for many years after World War II. Farmers are very get a lot of benefits in Texas and the United States. About $3 billion went into Texas farmers at this time. The bad thing about it is that only a number of tenant farmers and sharecroppers took advantage of it. The money was given out to individuals who own the land. Now, a lot of the FERA programs also focused on rural rehabilitation, like creating reservoirs to have clean water, water treatment plants. They were not very effective at relieving poverty. I believe that poverty is relieved via education, resettlement administrations, didn't really try to relocate people. It didn't really work because they didn't want to leave their homes. And the Farm Security Administration, again, it lends money to tenants, and this one lends money to tenants, but it's not enough money for them to do anything. First of all, there's not enough money. Only about 4% of the tenants get it. And then they don't get enough money. They get enough money to buy like 20 acres or something like that, and they can't do a whole bunch with that. You need a little bit more to be a productive farmer. The other thing that we have is we have the Rural Electrification Act, and this is sponsored by Sam Rayburn, and this is why he has a lake named after him. We're going to build reservoirs like Toledo Bend, Lake Ray Roberts, Lake Sam Rayburn, and these are going to be made to where we can, when we have these huge storms in Texas, that we can go ahead and capture the water and then release it a little at a time to generate electricity for these new urban towns that are popping up. Now, private companies are going to eventually take over this function, but what is this going to get Texans? Indoor plumbing. It's going to get them electric kitchen appliances, refrigeration. Now, rural folk had more time for relaxation. Their food lasted longer. They had forms of entertainment through the television. And, things were much better as we progressed at this time. Now, the National Recovery Administration, the NRA, not the National Rifle Association, was the organization that focused on industry. But it doesn't really matter in Texas because the only thing that we really focus on industry is shipbuilding in Galveston. The other thing about it is that the National Industrial Recovery Organization, which was under the NRA, was a huge bureaucratical mess. I mean, there was just too many codes. You had labor unions of all different kinds getting involved. You had government codes, you had government quotas, you had government budgets, and it didn't work well. It wasn't efficient. It was just too big of a bureaucratic monster. It was declared unconstitutional, and then later on, Congress passed the Wagner National Labor Relations Act, and that one does work. It outlaws unfair labor practices. Okay, it gives a worker right to organize. It abolishes child labor, sets up minimum wages. It does that. Okay, under the Wagner National Relations Act and the Fair Labor Standards Act of 1938. You'll have minimum wage, defined overtime pay, and the outlaw of child labor. Not because they don't want them to get hurt, but because they're undercutting labor. That's why, okay? Miriam Ferguson's difficulty as a governor, she proposed to increase taxes to reduce the state debt. I'm sorry. Uh, Legislature passed its own tax incentives instead. They repealed prohibition, and it was too difficult to enforce prohibition. There's a lot of alcohol out there, so why don't we repeal it? The 21st Amendment in 1933. People will be happier. The 18th Amendment is gone, and it's okay. Too many problems for Ferguson to run again. So James V. Allred is elected governor in 1934, and he cooperates with Roosevelt. Roosevelt comes out in 1935 with a Social Security program, and the biggest problem with implementing Social Security was the termination of eligibility, because before you had to be declared eligible, and the funding of payments, and finally by 1937, 125,000 Texans are receiving Social Security benefits. Now, Social Security it's called a survivor insurance. Okay, you're not really supposed to get your Social Security. You're supposed to do so well that you don't need your Social Security. It's an insurance, right? It's like Well, I've had car insurance for 23 years with Geico, and I've only made one claim that was my fault. It was my wife's fault, but it's not a big deal, okay? So they've gotten the best of me, right? They paid that guy $1,500. I give them more than that in a premium every year. Okay, now with that said, I did get hit one time by an uninsured individual, and they gave me money to fix my truck, but that was my fault. Okay, so wouldn't it be cool that if you had your insurance for 10 years and you didn't have an accident, they would give you back the money? No, it's not the way it works. It's insurance. That's what Social Security is. Alred is easily reelected in 1936. He's pretty laid back. Social Security obligations are doing good, but hey, you know what? If you're not working, you don't get any Social Security, and also uh, domestic jobs are not included. Now, everybody gets Social Security. If you never work a day in your life and you're not disabled, you will get a whopping $128 a month, even though you don't put any money into your Social Security. That's the way it works. Okay. They also approve a teacher retirement fund, which I'm a part of now, and they check the cost of state agencies. Um, they also stash away $3 million for the state centennial celebration in 1936. Um, they do actually pretty cool things in 1936, 100th anniversary of Texas. It's really cool. And in addition, I hope I'm alive in 2036 for that's in 16 years. Yeah, I think I could make it if things are good for the 200th anniversary of bicentennial of Texas. Now Roosevelt encounters problems in his second term. He's very liberal. He's all about spending money and going against the wealthy, even though he's wealthy as hell himself. He tries to pack the court in 1937, and he gets a lot of criticism, and it doesn't work out for him. In addition to that, then we're going to have in the Democratic primary election, you have 13 candidates, and there's a guy by the name of Wilbur Lee Pappy O'Daniel. Pappy Lee O'Daniel, or we call him Pappy, right? Now, his platform is the Ten Commandments. Okay, he wins the primary. Now he's also Papilio Daniel and the Light Crust Doughboys. He is actually like a DJ, and he advertises this light crust dough flour. Okay, or flour dough or whatever you want to call it. I don't remember. So people heard him again. You have these individuals that we elect as these politicians that are populist candidates because we think they're like us. They say it like it is, and all that. Yeah, but they don't know a damn thing about running a country or a state. He's a very ineffective governor. There's frequent stalemates in the legislature. He challenges and changes his position on pensions and on sales tax. He vetoed several bills that were really important bills for the state of Texas, but he is reelected. I guess just like tonight, right? I think Donald Trump got reelected. Ugh. Anyway, not a bad thing. He's just not my candidate. Right? I'm pretty sure some people like him out there if he got elected. Right, Lulu? Lulu, quit chewing on yourself. It's my dog's over there and keeps chewing on herself. Now, there is a significant opposition, but he wins with a runoff, without a runoff. Now, let's talk about FDR as we close. And Texas closes as we're going to go into World War II, and that's going to be for the next unit. Roosevelt's New Deal was not a radical departure from the old plan. It's just what FDR did is that he created a system where there was finally a safety net in the United States, and Uncle Sam became bigger than ever. Roosevelt does not advocate a socialist system, even though his practices were socialist in practice. Okay, um, he did not intervene with the states. Once the states had the federal money, they were allowed to disperse it as they felt it was needed and necessary. Roosevelt's programs do not end the Great Depression. Okay, under any circumstances did they end it. As if all, they actually stalled it, and had it not been for World War II, we would have had a bigger depression. We would have had a depression within a depression. And finally, World War II is going to bring the depression to an end. And it's going to bring it to an end because of the massive production of everything in the United States. And remember, the one thing that Texas has to its advantage is land, land, land. Okay? And during World War II, we're going to do a lot of cool things with it. So for now, I'm going to leave you and make sure that you listen to these lectures, even though I look tired and they're disjointed. But, a lot of the material that's going to be on the exam, I covered, okay? All right, so you all take care, have a good night, and be kind to each other. If the candidate that you wanted to win didn't win, don't worry. It's not the end of the world. We live in a democracy, and everything will be okay. You all take care and be kind to each other.